Biology is the study of life, but at some point, life didn't exist. So let's talk about that first instance where we got something out of nothing. We've talked a lot about the basic principles of evolution already, but this really makes more sense when we start to talk about the living organisms that are out there and how we think that they're all related. So we're going to have a minor challenge of going through all of life and talking about how we got where we are today. In this lecture series, we're going to be starting with how we think life originated. Then we'll talk about the geological timescale, how we make sense of this vast stretch of time we're going to discuss. Then we'll look at kingdom Animalia specifically. And lastly, we'll put ourselves in context. So first, where did life come from? Let's remind ourselves about the levels of biological organization. This is a really helpful way to organize biology and recognize that there are different levels and different things happen in each level. These first few here, up until the organelles, none of these things are alive. They are all useful, they're really cool, interesting stuff happens, but each of these individual pieces isn't alive. And it's this cellular level where now we have the magic of life. But of course, there was a time where life didn't exist. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. That's really old. And we think approximately 4 billion years ago, the Earth had cooled a little bit because it was very, very hot when it first formed. And once it started to cool, we had some oceans going around. And we call this oceans the primordial soup. And within this primordial soup, there were different molecules that were starting to form. And scientists hypothesized that within these protomolecules, we had some precursors to amino acids and nucleotides. And it was from these precursors that we have eventually saw the macromolecules that are part of all living cells came to be. One of the leading theories right now is the RNA peptide world, sometimes just called RNA world. We think that RNA was the first form of life because RNA can form really complex three-dimensional shapes and can actually carry out many different biological functions. Not necessarily fast or well, but the fact that it can cleave bonds or make them, depending on the configuration, that allows for some of these basic processes of life to happen. Because remember, evolution is just selecting what works and what's available rather than searching for something that's the best or efficient. Here's a slightly easier infographic to look at this. So first, once there was an RNA molecule capable of replication, then it was able to make more of itself. Then it could get more and more complex. Eventually, there was a switch from RNA to DNA as the substrate with which we encoded all this hereditary material because DNA is a lot more stable and it's just easier to keep that safe. So, can you explain? How do we think life originated?